watching Rogers TV.
Hello and welcome to Everyday Politics with Laura May Lindo. I am your host, Laura May, and we are on land held down, cared for, loved and stewarded by the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. And to start us off, I'd like to offer you this reflection. When we think about the experiences of Indigenous communities with education, oftentimes a lot of what happens on the ground is based on decisions being made on high. Pieces of legislation have guided the decisions and the experiences that Indigenous folks have had with non-Indigenous people in our education system. And for a lot of us, we've looked at this in retrospect and realized that there has been an error in our ways. This is an opportunity for us to actually be proactive, to consider Bill 33 and the impact that it might have on Indigenous communities, on Black communities, on communities of color, and to be perfectly honest, on all of our communities, because Bill 33 incorporates within it a call for ministerial directives, control that would be centered in the minister's office. And while that might be good to some people, they might think that that's okay in theory, what I'd like to do is to speak to some folks who have argued that in practice, we've got to be concerned. And so for that reason, today I have invited the lovely Jeff Pelich to come and chat with me. He is the president of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, ETFO, in Waterloo region. And so we will get to chatting with Jeff right after this break.
Aging Well brings you conversations with experts to help empower your golden years with enthusiasm and optimism. Don't miss Aging Well with Angela and Alice Liu, Mondays at 7 p.m.
David Prang from the Chamber of Commerce Brantford-Brant speaks with community members about events and organizations that impact the city of Brantford and the county of Brant. Chamber TV, Thursdays at 6:30 p.m., right here on Rogers TV.
My name is Aaron from Monster Heat on YouTube, and if you love extreme challenges like I do, then tune in every Monday at 10:30 p.m. on Rogers TV, and you'll get to witness some of this. Or maybe you're into some spicy food challenges at restaurants and some hot sauce. Well, I got you covered. See, over here at Monster Heat, we do it all, and you can watch it all on Rogers TV. See you all there, and stay spicy, everybody.
The regulars, the guys who keep this place in business. Last week, they had something to celebrate. Jason had just finished university. So they toasted his profs, his TAs, his old roommates. Well, they toasted just about everyone. But I worry about and take care of my guys. So even when I know they're not driving, sometimes that means bringing them a little surprise. And then they had a drink to me.
Brought to you by Smart Serve Ontario and Arrive Alive, Drive Sober.
Hi, I'm Dave Carroll. Every Thursday at 8 p.m. right here on Rogers TV, we have a brand new show called About Brant with Dave Carroll. We're going to be talking about Brant and the different areas of the community that makes Brantford, Brant County's Six Nations tick. We're going to be talking with people from all sorts of different areas and helping us understand the community we have better. Every Thursday, 8 p.m., About Brant with Dave Carroll right here on Rogers TV.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Jeff, it is so lovely to have you here.
I am thrilled to be here.
Oh my goodness. Well, listen, I want to dive right in, but I want to give everybody who's watching a bit of a recap, right? So I've asked you to come to speak to me about Bill 33, which is called An Act to Amend Various Acts in Relation to Child and Youth Family Services, Education, and Colleges and Universities. So that was tabled by the Honorable Paul Calandra, who is currently our Minister of Education, on May 29th, 2025. So it's very recent. Right now, the House isn't sitting yet. I think they come back in October. We're just going to pause for a moment. sit with that information. But when they do come back, from what I can gather from the Ontario Legislative Assembly website, it's still in second reading. So there should be some more debate time on second reading. For those that are new to the process of turning a bill into law, that means that there's a certain amount of hours that one has to debate a bill before it can go to the next step, before they can actually vote and figure out what's going to happen next. The reason that I've been focusing so much on Bill 33 is because that also means that there's an opportunity for us to start to really think about the consequences and impacts of some of the things that are in that piece of legislation. And so for our conversation, I want us to focus on kindergarten to grade 12 education. And I want to start sort of easy and breezy. When you read Bill 33, what stood out for you? What were your thoughts, your feels? How did that feel for you?
What stood out was control. I think it's the government wanting to take control of school boards, and really demonstrating that they do not trust our locally elected officials to make decisions. And they do not trust the citizens of Waterloo Region to make decisions on who should represent them at the school board table. Yeah. And it's very problematic to democracy when you have a government with really 5 representatives here locally who represent us at Queen's Park. But we have a boardroom table that has far more than that, who really truly understand what the local constituents want when it comes to public education. And so I'm concerned, and I know a lot of education workers are concerned and parents are concerned of what that's going to mean for how we set direction in Waterloo Region.
Yeah, and I want to take a step back because there's been a lot of discussion around the role of trustees. I know if we look at the voting turnout, that oftentimes there's like lower voting turnout for the municipalities and there's lower voting turnout for our trustees and all of this kind of stuff compared to provincial and federal elections. Although I think we're seeing like a mass decrease of voter turnout around the board, which is something else that we have to have a discussion about. However, when it comes to the trustees, my gut has been telling me that part of why we see a lower turnout is because we don't quite know what they do, or we don't know how the trustees were imagined within our democracy. So I want us to actually start there. When you think about the role of a trustee within that bigger democratic system, what do you imagine that position to be? Like, why is that such an important role for us?
Well, I think what we see in board meetings is really 20% of the job. Yeah. And as a former MPP yourself, you know the huge amount of constituency work that you have. And I think a big part of a trustee's role is to help folks navigate the system. Yeah. And when their child is facing challenges, when they have concerns about what's happening in a school, the trustee really is one of those points of contact where if they're not satisfied with the response that they're getting, they can call the trustee. Or if they just don't know what to do. Yeah. That is who they can contact because they know that that person is there looking out for their best interest.
Before you move from there, can you give me an example of the kinds of problems then you could bring to a trustee? Like, let's go deep.
Yeah, anything. I think it's anything from a board's policy and procedure. If they have brought forward something at a system level that they have concerns with, like, and I'm talking about staff, not necessarily trustees. Yeah. That can be an avenue that, parents reach out to the trustee to share their concerns. And it can go all the way down to a granular level in a classroom itself, where if a parent has concerns, they've, chatted with the teacher, they still have concerns. They've chatted with the principal, they still have concerns. They've chatted with the superintendent, they still have concerns. Really, a trustee is there to help them decide what's next and what we can do. Or even just as simple as, my child's experiencing this, I don't know who to call. This is a massive system. School boards are large. Yeah. Who do I call and what do I do to make this work? And oftentimes, the majority of what trustees do is to say, you really should talk to the classroom teacher. Yeah. They're the one that is designing this program, and you should have conversations with them because, that is your first step. And then when that doesn't work again, you really should talk to the principal. So it really kind of it's a problem-solving approach for parents. And they are there and they know the system and how to work within it.
So there's two other pieces that I want to sort of threads that I want to pick up on. One is that in Waterloo region, I think we're like the third highest settlement area in the country, actually. And so there's a huge newcomer population who honestly won't know what our education system is like or how to navigate it and that kind of stuff, who we know can rely on that level of elected representation to try and get help, right? I want to connect that to your initial response to Bill 33 around control, because I also imagine, and you tell me if I'm incorrect, that while the trustees are doing that work on the ground, they're best positioned to like note any kind of patterns, like gaps in knowledge that the community has, which means they can also become a bridge to government. But because of the way this legislation is written, and I would argue Bill 33 is coming at a time where we're seeing a lot of legislation in a lot of areas that are just sort of ministerial control. The minister can decide whatever's going to happen next. The minister can write the directive and decide what's going to happen next. And so that notion of control from on top is really, really troubling. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more about the other side of the trustee advocacy, like what in a perfect world, not in a world based on fear, which I think is part of what we're operating in right this second, but in a perfect world, what does it look like when the trustees are communicating with the government? What kind of change can happen from that level of conversation?
I think a lot. And I think, unfortunately, over the last few years, oftentimes trustees will pass motions and do exactly what you're talking about. We know, we've had conversations with our constituents. We have had conversations with folks in our communities. This is what they want to see in their schools. This is what they want to see in their school boards. And the trustees recognize that there are limits to their power.
Yeah.
They really receive funding from the provincial government, and so they will pass motions to send letters to the Minister of Education saying, we really would appreciate some more funding for school repairs or for smaller class sizes or to support newcomer communities. And unfortunately, too often, the responses that they get from the Minister and the Ministry of Education are form letters talking about historic investments and more political spin than actual, we hear you, we see you, we want to do better. And so really, it's, I think what you're imagining, I think trustees are already trying to do.
Yes.
But they don't have a partner on the other end who's willing to engage in those conversations because they're more concerned about appeasing their base, getting reelected, and that control that you talk about.
Yeah, and I am literally of the opinion that more pressure and support for that kind of advocacy can actually make a difference. And I'm taking this is totally my own opinion based on my time at Queen's Park. Like, I remember moments where there was a bill, it was a healthcare bill, and France Gélina, she's still the minister or the critic for healthcare, had a box filled with petitions. And like just sort of put that box of these petitions in, read that into the record. And while the entire legislation wasn't repealed, changes were made. People knew that they were being watched, which I think is really important, right? So what do you think would be say a message to the public to try to support trustees in that kind of advocacy? Because if they don't have a partner in the government at this particular moment in time, then I think that they have to look to a partner in the people, right? So what would be a message that you would give to folks to build that partnership and that relationship?
I think the best piece of advice I ever received in my own leadership journey and organizing journey was from Olivia Chow. And she talked a lot about the fact that politicians don't care until they're forced to care because they might not be re-elected. They might lose their job. And so it's great that trustees send letters. It does go right to the people who can hear those concerns, but until we, as a region, back them up, are behind them, going to MPPs, going to their offices, calling the Minister of Education, saying this is not okay, until we do that, to make them afraid that, oh, I might lose my seat, then nothing will change until we do that. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I will say that the one thing that it seems like this government cares about is being reelected. And so let's let's go to the streets, let's have those conversations to make sure that they can't ignore us. And that's really what needs to happen, is to back up the trustees in what they're saying.
Yeah, that's a really interesting and important point. So like, shout out to Olivia Chow for that, because I remember when I was at Queen's Park, if I saw something, like based on my own background in education, I would see something come across the desk or something in legislation, I'd be like, I have questions. And if it was just me saying it, nobody cared. Nope. But as soon as I could say, but my community, they're writing to me, like my inbox is inundated with people saying there's a problem here, that slowed the process down. And I worry sometimes that with pieces of legislation, that make us feel siloed. So like the trustees are operating over here and the public's operating over here and a parent is different than the public, then all of a sudden we sort of lose that level of power that we have, right? Mm-hmm. So what I'm gonna do is actually, we're gonna have a little break, and then I'm gonna bring us all back to talk about a statement that ETFO had put out, because I think it encapsulates some of the bigger problems of the bill. And it's also something that reflects back to me what the young people that I'd interviewed before about Bill 33 were also saying, right? But in the meantime, I made you bread.
Thank you.
It's so important for people to know I baked that. So we'll be right back after this break.
Everyone is Addicted is a judgment-free space for real conversations about addiction. It's a show about breaking the stigma and building empathy. Everyone is Addicted, Tuesdays at 11 p.m. The Quintessence Coalition brings you immersive experiences and conscious collaborations from artists across the country. Don't miss the sights, sounds, and spirits of the Quintessence Coalition. Saturdays at 8:30 p.m.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Marshall Crocker, and I'm the host of the Brantford Red Sox Report, where we talk about the IBL's Brantford Red Sox, one of the most historic and popular teams in the IBL. We're going to meet the players that make the game happen on the field, and all the staff and community members that make us so entertaining and fun to watch off the field. Check us out every week on Rogers TV.
Everybody knows not to drink and drive, but some people still think it's okay to take drugs and drive. Police have the authority, the ability, and the tools to determine if drivers are impaired by legal or illegal drugs. And because drug-impaired drivers can pose just as great a risk as drunk drivers, they face the same penalties, like the loss of their driver's license, a criminal record, fines, and more. A message from the RCMP, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and Arrive Alive, Drive Sober.
Mondays at 6 p.m., we're bringing an exciting new show to you, Inside Brant with Armanda. You can look forward to it to find out what's going on in Brant County. And we will have all kinds of local artisans and tons of stuff that your family can enjoy. So if it's happening here in Brant County, you can be sure to see it here, 6 p.m. every Monday on Inside Brant.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, so I'm actually going to read a section of an ETFO press release. I had read this to the students in my first interview, so we've had a conversation, but I wanted to get your take on some of the details that are in there, okay? So, and for those that are watching, I will make sure again to have the link to the press release so you can read it in full, but this is just one little section. The proposed changes would expand the minister's authority to initiate investigations and place boards under direct provincial supervision, taking power from democratically elected trustees and replacing community decision makers with directives from Queen's Park. At the same time, the legislation would force school boards to introduce or reintroduce school resource officers, or the SRO program, despite their well-documented harm, particularly to Black, Indigenous, and other racialized students. What I'd like to do is actually have you speak about two different things, but we'll start with this first one. The notion of the minister taking over the school boards. I have to be honest, I've been having a bit of a struggle with this one because this isn't law yet. Bill 33 is not law, but the minister has already taken control of a number of boards. So we've seen like there's stuff happening in the Toronto District School Board. They've taken over the Toronto Catholic Board as well. There's been concerns that, and like that's what I mean when we're operating from this place of fear. We're already watching the thing happen that's in the piece of legislation that ETFO is trying to warn people about. And if they're doing it before this bill becomes law, then what will happen when the bill becomes law? And so I'm wondering if you can give the guests, or the audience, a bit of insight into what is happening with some of the boards that have actually had to deal with the minister sort of taking over.
I think it comes from a variety of different perspectives, but I think for most folks who are parents within the system, they see delays. And you know, one of the roles that a trustee plays is transparency and accountability, to make sure that the system is being transparent, that they are being accountable to the folks that use it. And unfortunately, when you have the minister come in and they appoint a supervisor to the board, that supervisor is accountable to one person, and that's the Minister of Education. Yeah. And their agenda and their spin on things is what's most important to that supervisor. And so when a parent calls to say, I'm having troubles navigating the system, they're waiting weeks and weeks and not even hearing anything necessarily back from that supervisor to say what to do. When a parent has concerns about what's happening in their child's class, they don't hear anything. And then when, more importantly, they hear something that maybe the Minister of Education is pushing and that this supervisor is putting into place in the school system, and they try to call that supervisor, the supervisor is likely going to say, I don't care, I'm doing what my boss is telling me to do. Yeah. And so that is the biggest concern for us, is that the people that we do this for, the students and their families, are not going to be heard, and their perspectives are not going to be valued.
Is there like rhyme or reason about who gets appointed as the supervisor? Like, how does that even get decided?
It gets decided by the minister, and at this point there is no, as far as I'm aware, I'm not aware of a criteria. And some of the folks often who are going into the system, they're not coming at it from an educational approach. Yeah. They're coming at it from a financial approach. Yeah. And as much as this minister likes to talk about schools, their finances being in shambles, I can tell you the situations that we're hearing about strange expenditures from trustees, those are the outliers. And in general, any financial problem that a board is having has been caused by this government. And so it's comical that they think that this minister's appointee is going to come in and fix things when the government is not going to be giving any additional funding to fix the problems.
You know what's funny? That's not funny, haha, but interesting and ironic is that the same kind, there was like a parallel system that happened in post-secondary when the Minister for Post-Secondary Education, at the time it was Minister Dunlop, had called together this blue ribbon task force. So the task force goes in and they're checking all sorts of stuff. And again, there was all these conversations because Laurentian had gone under and there were conversations about mismanagement of money. The task force said, you've got to invest in the sector. And that didn't, like, it didn't happen. And so anyway, those are other questions. That's a whole other show, my friends. So we don't quite know what the criteria will be for the supervisors. And is there any rule that you know of about how long that supervision can happen? Or is that also up to the minister?
Up to the minister, from my understanding.
So I can understand why people are raising concerns around that level of control. I can understand why people are worried about all of that. And more than anything, I can understand, my concern is that it's already being implemented. Like, I feel like it's a false choice that we're being given about the bill because it's not even law yet and the things are already happening. And that leads me to the second piece. The second piece of ETFO's press release, at least in that paragraph, they were talking about the school resource officer program. Not every school has them, not every board has them, but many did. And I'm wondering if you can give folks a little bit of a background at all? Like, what do you know about this school resource program, where it was at before Bill 33 decided that they were bringing it all back?
It's a complex issue.
Yeah.
And it's one that really, when you have conversations with people about how they feel about it, it often comes down to their own experience.
Yeah.
And often it's underpinned by their own identity as well.
Yeah.
And so I think back in 2021, our school board had formed, actually it was earlier than 2021, formed an ad hoc committee to take a look at the school resource officer and make a determination if this was something that we were going to continue in our schools. And as part of that, they made a recommendation to discontinue the program, offer an apology to the communities that were harmed from the use of the SRO. And coincidentally enough, that almost coincided directly with an election.
Yeah.
And this is why Bill 33 is so important, is because in 2021, the previous elected trustees made this decision to say, we're going to remove them. And it was absolutely an issue in that election in 2022.
Yeah.
And many of the trustees that voted in favor of removing school resource officers were returned to their seats.
Yeah.
And many of the trustees who were elected in that election took a stance on that. And many of those folks agreed with that decision.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about decisions made by a local community, this was a decision not only made by trustees, but then upheld in the election by the citizens of Waterloo Region. And so it's disturbing that all of a sudden we have a Minister of Education and a Premier and a government saying, we don't trust you, Waterloo Region. We don't trust the decision that you made, and now we're going to force this upon you, even though you don't want it.
Yeah, and what I do remember as well about that, when the board made that decision, there was a report where like students were giving their own opinions about what it was that what the impact was of the program, right? I also remember police, because at that point I was elected, so I was at Queen's Park when this was happening. I remember police services not knowing what the program was meant to do. I'm not saying it from a place of like being judgy or anything, but the program had been around for a long time and had never really been defined, which meant that it was doing different things in different places. And so I was hearing from officers that were part of those kinds of programs that at the very minimum, like, define what we're supposed to be doing while we're there, because that's also causing tension between us and the community that, you know, they're signing up to serve. I am an eternal optimist, and I believe that people choose the things that they're doing because they want good in their community. Whether or not the good is happening is a whole other conversation, and what we do when the good isn't happening is what I think Bill 33 is forcing us to reckon with. Because that means that those young people who said, like, voiced concerns that the trustees listened to are no longer being heard by the government. I'm wondering if, I should check into this, but I don't know if you happen to know, but if that report that was given to the board at that time, if that would be available for the public, because I would love to just resend it to the minister. Just a little, you know, and maybe that's something for those that are trying to find ways to become more actively engaged in this process, can start asking in their respective boards and at their schools, like, what information do we have? The other thing that I wanted to ask you about was professional development days. So I know PD days from my children when they are no longer at school that day.
Correct?
That's a PD day, my friends. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but I feel I was still in elected office, so it would have been 21, 22. And the government did something that they made the boards tell everybody what their PD days were about. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then there was like a thing that was posted. But I did not realize that the government could mandate what folks were doing on those days. Like, I actually thought as a parent that the professional development days are sort of determined by the teachers and the education workers to decide what they needed. Is that not what that is?
No, of course not, Laura May.
Tell me what a PD day is, and tell me why I came across a ministerial directive that said, and I'm going to have a link for those that are watching, that they must discuss the SRO program, and that the hope was that they would have officers like paired with somebody from the school to talk about the wonderful nature of this program. What is happening?
PD days are very frustrating, and I would say that's one of the bones of contention for a lot of education workers because they don't always connect directly to the content. And we would hope that educators get to make professional decisions on what they feel is most important to their learning at the time. It's not. And there is absolutely days where educators are using the day to do report cards and assessment. Fair enough. And there is a day where educators have to watch, and all board employees have to watch their health and safety videos. Exciting stuff. But then there are days that there's always a board improvement plan and a school improvement plan that some of the time on a PD day is spent, but then there are ministry directives on what must be covered. And it's often related specifically to what the ministry direction is at the time. And we are taught as classroom teachers not to bring our politics into the classroom. You know, you can take a look at critical thinking, you can have conversations with students, but you have to be politically neutral as much as possible. Unfortunately, that doesn't go for the same for education of and professional development of teachers. And this is a perfect example where it really is, let's indoctrinate education workers into a perspective of this government. And there are times when the ministry does come down with directives. I'm thinking specifically over the last few years in the Right to Read report, which was a fantastic report. But again, similar to a previous conversation, you said they take bits and pieces of it that fit their narrative. And so there is training on early literacy instruction and diagnostic assessment. Again, things that a lot of education workers do value. But then there's a lot of education workers that may not be directly teaching some of these concepts. And when there was a push for mathematics, what about those folks that don't teach a math class? Because that happens in elementary and in secondary. And so those PD days are not that useful. And are often a waste for a lot of people, unfortunately. And when we heard about the SRO, a portion of the day for that program, again, it is to push one political agenda that, from my perspective, again, and from my own personal experience, isn't necessarily, I call it incidental exposure therapy. And when you ask a person, like, what is your opinion on SROs? A lot of folks who don't understand the complexities of it will say, well, I had police officers in my school, and it really helped, you know, to demystify the police and to build positive relationships with police. And that's great for you, but for a lot of folks that don't have that same experience, particularly from Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities and queer communities, having a school resource officer there in hopes that exposure is going to make things better without taking a look at the system, without supporting social services, without giving them the support that they need to be successful, it's not going to work. And it's going to only cause further harm.
So, as you were speaking, I kept thinking about the OHRC, the Ontario Human Rights Commission, recently published a report called Dreams Delayed. They were looking at the educational outcomes for Black students from kindergarten to grade 12. And they have a whole ton of recommendations of things that people can do. Their whole way of being in the world is educational to try and make systems better. Like, why aren't we learning about that in a PD session?
I don't know, and these are not new concepts, and I wish I could say that the Human Rights Commission report was, not new. It was new information, but it isn't. I did my thesis 12 years ago on the elementary experience of criminalized men, and all of this research is decades old about the school-to-prison pipeline and the challenges of the system, and the impacts of bringing police and surveillance into schools. It's not new. But for some reason, we continue to be stuck on the facts of we want police officers in school, and I don't get it. I don't know why.
I'm going to ask you to do me a solid and send me some of that research, that like the old research that you were talking about, because I also feel like that's something. Right now, this kind of legislation and these moments in time force us outside to connect some dots for folks. And so I also have like an advocacy idea. I don't know if I'm allowed to have this idea, but I'm saying it out loud and nobody can stop me. But it would be awesome if people started to write to the minister requesting that these kinds of reports, from the old reports to the newer reports, are part of the professional development day. Because I don't know how else an educator or an education worker will know how to adjust things in the classroom if they don't have an opportunity to talk to people about findings of these reports.
Correct.
I also don't know why we say education isn't political. We should talk about that while we go to a break, because people say that to me all the time. Education shouldn't be political, but when you've got, first off, it's all determined by a political system, and then we have mechanisms where a minister can make decisions about what's going to happen, including the professional development, and what also happens to you in teacher ed, then I think that's like wholly political.
It is.
Yeah, so listen, you folks talk amongst yourselves while we have more bread. We'll be right back after this break.
The Quintessence Coalition brings you immersive experiences and conscious collaborations from artists across the country. Don't miss the sights, sounds, and spirits of the Quintessence Coalition. Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. The Quintessence Coalition brings you immersive experiences and conscious collaborations from artists across the country. Don't miss the sights, sounds, and spirits of the Quintessence Coalition. Saturdays at 8:30 p.m.
My name is Aaron from Monster Heat on YouTube, and if you love extreme challenges like I do, then tune in every Monday at 10:30 p.m. on Rogers TV, and you'll get to witness some of this. Or maybe you're into some spicy food challenges at restaurants and some hot sauce. Well, I got you covered. See, over here at Monster Heat, we do it all, and you can watch it all on Rogers TV. See you all there, and stay spicy, everybody.
After a night out with your friends, there's always options for getting home safely. You could call your BFF, your mom or dad, whoever you can count on for a safe ride home. You could call your favorite cab company or 1-888 taxi guy. Or you could use the Arrive Alive smartphone app to help you choose your ride. Be it a friend, transit, or taxi, getting home safely is app easy. Now available for iOS and Android devices. Visit arrivealive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive, drive sober.
My name is Chef D. Most days, you'll find me feeding high-profile personalities in even higher-pressure kitchens. But now I'm taking an ordinary food truck and a slice of summer to get out of my comfort zone and into parts of the community normally out of my reach. It's a gamble, but if I can use my passion for food to help out some amazing folks, it'll be worth the road trip.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Okay, so we've had a conversation about the trustees and what we see the minister has publicly said, too many school boards, we don't need trustees, that kind of stuff. We've had a conversation about the school resource officer program. We've had a conversation about young people, family needs, all of that kind of stuff. I want us to go back sort of high level and think about our democratic system. And so starting from there, I want us to sort of look from that vantage point and think about these trustees. We have had, not just in Waterloo region, but we've seen in a variety of school boards a number of tensions. I mean, there were a lot of issues among trustees in the Peel District School Board, and at that point, that also was a board that the minister intervened, right? Although that intervention was rare because they intervened based on racism at the board table, and I did some research when I was elected. That was, I think, the only time that had ever happened in the province. Usually when they take over, it's financial. It's about budgets and fiduciary duties and that kind of stuff. So when we've seen those kinds of similar tensions where people's beliefs about what communities need or the needs of their particular communities are in tension in that space. Can you talk to the folks that are watching a little bit about why it's important for us to see that transparently, openly in our democratic system? Like, why is the understanding that tension and seeing it important? Because there's also a part of me that thinks that the desire is to clean everything up so everything looks perfect, when in actuality, sometimes we need to see the messy.
Absolutely. And I think as much as there has been a lot of discussion locally about dysfunction at our board table, I would challenge anyone to turn on question period at Queen's Park and say, is this not the same thing, and why is one okay? And then for the government to turn around and say, oh, it's not okay at the school board level.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's much more civil at the school board level. Much more civil.
Absolutely.
Far more civil. And I think the interesting part is, as much as, you know, I have folks on our local school board that I don't always agree with, I am standing up for their rights to be an elected official, and to stand up for their rights to be able to say what they need to say, and have that debate and have that discussion. Because in a democracy, that makes us better. And having those conversations and listening to people's experiences, to people's perspectives, but also being able to hear them and then change our mind and say, yeah, I was wrong. And it does have an impact, and it's okay. So the fact that this government isn't interested in that and is trying to stifle that is problematic.
Absolutely. I even remember when I had just been elected and they wanted to bring back the health curriculum. How far back did we go? To like
2018?
Yeah, so in 2018 they wanted to bring our little 90s health curriculum back. And they were adamant that this is what was going to happen. And it was the young people that were organizing, doing walkouts at class and whatever. But I was at one of the board meetings, and actually my eldest decided that they wanted to delegate. And I keep sort of bringing back these moments where we see people that aren't the ones that you would suspect wanting to say something or stand up for something. That space became a space for that. And I believe that no matter what people felt about the health curriculum, was it going too fast? Was the new curriculum, age appropriate? Those were some of the concerns that people had. Without hearing from the public like that, you don't have an opportunity to sort of rethink. You don't have an opportunity to imagine differently or reimagine what could be. I think at that board table, when you provide an opportunity for people to challenge each other's beliefs about what is needed and come together collectively to create something, there's an opportunity for real change, right?
It gets us out of our silos. I think that's the big part.
Silos.
And we have to protect that in our democratic institutions, because we get stuck so often. We are friends with people that are often like-minded. We are in spaces where folks are often very like-minded to ourselves. But in our democratic institutions, our elected officials, we're not always going to be like-minded, and that's good. Because that begins to push our thinking and make us think about, oh, let's think about this experience in this perspective. It's good for everyone. And so it's concerning when we're trying to get rid of that and trying to limit that, particularly on a local level, because it's one thing, again, to be at Queen's Park and to represent perspectives, but it really comes down to the local governments to impact the change and to make sure that their perspectives are heard within our school board in particular. That we need those people there.
Absolutely. I also think to myself, like, how does one person at Queen's Park, your job is to create sort of a generic idea that everybody is going to have to deal with. So there's a generic piece of legislation that's going to come down, that's going to effect change across the board, but you're relying, whether you want to admit it or not, on local governments to enact it in a way that makes sense in that local space. So how do we concentrate power in this one central place at Queen's Park and then believe that the needs of Indigenous community members that are far north in the province need the exact same thing as the folks that are even in Waterloo region. The folks that are here, if you live more in the rural areas, your needs are so much different than if you're in the city center. If you're in the city center, you're not just navigating these changes to the Education Act that are outlined, the amendments in Bill 33, but you're navigating the government's decision to close the safe injection sites. Like these are folks. Do you remember that song? The mailman is a person in your neighborhood.
I certainly do.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's right. I just sang for you. You're lucky. You're welcome. But those are different competing needs that are happening on the ground. And I can't imagine that the minister has the time. Even if I give grace, there would be no time to deal with those sort of nuanced needs. But when you're at a trustee table where somebody who's representing some of the more rural folks or different advocates that are coming in or different issues that are coming up, even when the city decides, okay, we're going to change transportation needs, that's going to have a different impact on people for busing, etc. Those conversations happen in all their messiness in those spaces.
Absolutely, and it is definitely that, because the trustees really do serve a governance role, and they do have those debates, because really Cambridge is very different from Wilmot. Cambridge is very different from Waterloo and Kitchener, and we have elected representatives from each of those areas, and at the board table they discuss what's going to be best for the entire board. And then they rely on school board staff to then interpret that based on the individual school, because every school is quite unique, and the needs of those schools are quite unique, and you need to be able to make those changes and to do things that are going to work for the students that are in front of you.
So I want to give a shout out to 3 different groups, and this is just organizations top of mind as we're having this conversation. The Ontario Autism Coalition had a press conference at Queen's Park. I'm going to see if I can find details for the press conference so that I can share with anybody who's watching. One of the concerns that they raised, or do you want to tell folks? No, you do. Jump in. What kinds of concerns did the Ontario Autism Coalition raise at Queen's Park? Like, what might that coalition of folks who have been advocating so hard and so well with such love and care, what kinds of concerns does Bill 33 raise for them?
Well, oftentimes the parents that are involved in this organization are trying to navigate a system, and their children are the most complex that we have in the system. And not only, oftentimes we often talk about how schools are kind of the only place that can't say no, that every child has the fundamental right to an education, and we 100% agree. The frustrating part is oftentimes students aren't there yet, or they're not getting the services in the community to help them be successful in those in the education community. And then the problem also is that our schools are amazingly underfunded. And so when those parents are saying, my child is not being successful, I know the teachers and all the people around them, all the education workers are truly doing their best. My child is communicating that they're struggling. Why aren't you helping? Like, we need help here. And really, trustees are one of those people that can help navigate that system. With one supervisor for an entire school board, it just ain't going to work. It's not going to work, and they're not going to be able to get that individual attention and build that relationship with the supervisor and help navigating the system. So absolutely they have concerns, and unfortunately this is one of those situations where this organization has been saying this for years, and it has not changed.
Another group that had a press conference, they're actually doing a tour of press conferences around the province and will be coming to Waterloo Region. I think it's October 16th. I will double check that information and make sure that folks that are watching have it. But police-free schools, who have long been advocating for the removal of police in schools based on what students have said the impact is, right? They also had a press conference at Queen's Park, also worried about the SRO program, but also noting that there are programs outside of the province. Like, I think they had mentioned in Alberta, there were some programs that had been reintroduced that are causing problems. So, like, we see examples of what happens, right? But let's just take a gander. For an organization like Police Free Schools, what do you think their big concern would be with Bill 33, outside of just we're going to reintroduce the program, but reintroducing the program and removing the trustees? What kinds of concerns do you think this is going to raise for folks?
Oh, so many concerns. I think that the school resource officer program, again, and we talked at length about it, I think it's one of those things where I do believe, like you, that maybe it's well-intentioned. Like, you hope that the people doing this are doing it for the right reasons, but we need to take a look at the harm that it's caused. And it's disturbing to me that a government is more concerned about hearing from their base of supporters that want things to go back to how things were 30 years ago, and a back to basics approach, as opposed to how did this impact you?
Yeah.
And I don't know many education workers out there that would openly welcome a situation where a child in their class, in their individual class, would feel unsafe.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any parent out there that would want their child to go to school and feel unsafe.
Yeah.
And so I don't understand why this government doesn't care that there will be some students that feel unsafe. And again, school resource officers aside, if the government cared, they would be investing in the mental health supports. They would be investing in communities that need additional social services, but they're not. They're just saying, again, it's going back to the incidental exposure therapy as opposed to true support and help to make people reach their full potential.
Thank you for that. And I just want to, before I ask you my favorite question, I also want to give a shout out to the folks behind Fix Our Schools, because they've also been doing so much advocacy around the state of the actual infrastructure in which our young people are trying to learn, and our community members are trying to educate folks. We've got schools, and this is an issue for us as well in Waterloo region, right?
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about why that kind of advocacy is important, and what happens when we lose our trustees and a minister who's far, far away is the one who's now responsible for this.
Well, taking a look at Elizabeth Ziegler locally, it's in a prime area in Waterloo region, a very core kind of area that I'm sure there would be some developers who would just love it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this government really likes developer friends, and we know that from previous decisions. And so when schools are crumbling and it's falling apart, is the government, we don't know.
Yeah.
Could the government intervene and say, we're not willing to pay the money to fix this beautiful building?
Yeah.
We would like to close it, and then we're going to force the school board to sell it off.
Yeah.
And that's likely some of the things that could happen. But we as a union and education workers, we join together with all the education workers in the region, but also the skilled trades to say, when you invest in public infrastructure, public schools, it brings more workers and trained skilled trades workers, good paying jobs to our community. Again, we're saying this, and why doesn't the government care about good paying jobs, skilled trades, and students in those buildings? Because oftentimes those buildings are not made for the class sizes that they have. They are not always safe. They are not always appropriate temperatures. And there is no physical space for kids when they need to take some time away. There's no space to do so.
That idea of joining with the skilled trades, it's very interesting because the government claims to be very much in support of the skilled trades. If there's anything that you have in your own resources and dockets of, like, you know, the stuff that advocacy has been looking at for that, please send it my way, because I'd love to share it. And I do think that that's something really important for folks to pay attention to, right?
Yes.
Because if we aren't using the skilled trades in a real way, but we're incorporating it into school, then you're not even setting those kids up for success, because there's nowhere for them to do their work.
No, and we do have a petition on this on our website.
Look
at that, Laura May.
Please share the petition
Absolutely,
with me. And
I will share the
petition with all of you. Okay, favorite question. If I could snap my fingers, you snap your fingers, and one system change, what would it be?
I would like our government to care about our students as much as education workers do. And I think one of the ways that they could do that is to take a look at the funding formula. Right now, students it's a per pupil fund, that an amount that is given to school boards. And if a student is identified with some type of extra need, there's a little bit of extra funding, but that's not enough. That's truly not enough to support all students, because we do know that some students require a little bit more time. And unfortunately, it's really left to education workers to figure it out, as this government just kind of continues on with what was good in 1998 when this funding formula was created. And so we need to take a look at that, because there's a lot of people that deeply care about our jobs and the students that we work with, because we know they're our future. We just don't see that from the leadership in Toronto.
Jeff, it has been amazing chatting with you. An absolute pleasure. Thank you so very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, folks, we'll be right back after this break.
Hi, Pastor Mark here. Join us each and every week on Sundays. All are welcome, no exceptions. That is St. Peter's Church, every Sunday at 11 a.m. God bless. We'll see you soon.
Hey everybody, the Rangers are back September the 19th, and so is this week in Rangers Nation. I'm excited to bring you season 2 of everything in Rangers Nation. You're gonna love it. Catch it on Rogers TV every Friday night at 6:30.
Hi, I'm Mike Farwell, and I'd like to invite you into this studio every weekday from 9 until 1 for a show that I think you're going to like. It's called The Mike Farwell Show, and it deals with the issues of the day. Local, provincial, national, even international. You'll hear from the newsmakers, and you'll get the chance to make news yourself when you call in and share your opinion. If you want to know what's going on in your community, The Mike Farwell Show is the place to find out.
After a night out with your friends, not having a plan for a safe ride home can leave you in a bad spot. You could end up riding in a police car, an ambulance, or a hearse. These unplanned modes of transportation can be a costly choice and do not take you home. Your plan could include a designated driver, a taxi, or public transit. Drink responsibly, choose your ride, and have a plan for a safe ride home.
Visit arrivealive.org to find out more.
Have you ever thought about just how much politics you speak about just in your own kitchen or in your living room? Or how many important ideas are shared or solutions to some of the world's biggest problems? Well, you're in luck, because I'm inviting some of my friends to come and speak to me about everyday politics, and I'm bringing my living room to you. So join me on Wednesday evenings from 6 until 7 for Everyday Politics with Laura May Lindo.
September 30th is Canada's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, honoring survivors of residential schools, their families and communities, and a reminder to acknowledge the truth of our history. In 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released a comprehensive report with 94 calls to action, a roadmap towards justice and healing. Learn more and take action.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Wasn't that an amazing conversation with Jeff? Like, big old shout out to the work that ETFO is doing. On that note, for those that are watching, I'm going to be sure to have a link to a press conference that ETFO had. It was on September 15th, and it featured quite a few important people that I want you folks to listen to. MPPs Catherine Fife and Ashlyn Clancy were both there. Greg Beaubier was there from the Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin and Gray Building Trades Council, and education worker union presidents across Waterloo region representing the Public Board, the Catholic Board, and the French Board were all at this press conference talking about the impact of this bill on the sector. And so I'll be sure to have a link to that. I'll also make sure to keep up some of the links that I had from last week, so you can take a look at the legislation. You can take a look at the response from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, for instance. If there's anybody out there who's watching who has particular questions or would like to come and talk to me about their own feelings about Bill 33, reach out to me anytime. Don't forget to follow me at everydaypolitics_official. That is my Instagram account. Folks know how to reach me. It is very, very easy to do. I am so very pleased to be doing this. Truly honored to bring this conversation to all of you, and we will see you next time.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
September 30th is Canada's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, honoring survivors of residential schools, their families and communities, and a reminder to acknowledge the truth of our history. In 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released a comprehensive report with 94 calls to action, a roadmap towards justice and healing. Learn more and take action.
Hey folks, it's me, Giovanni Petiti, the host of Not Tonight. It's the new late night talk show right here on Rogers TV. We got fabulous guests, a lot of laughs. It's just like the Jimmy Kimmel Show. If you order the Jimmy Kimmel Show on Wish. So join me Sunday at 10 o'clock right here on Rogers TV. Nice.